The music stopped mid-note. A sea of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos turned toward the grand staircase, where a woman in a sapphire dress stood, still, composed, and radiant. Her hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her chin slightly lifted, her presence undeniable. Nathaniel Blake's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one spoke. No one moved. Who was she? And what was she doing here? 12 hours earlier, Isabel Carter was scrubbing coffee stains from the carpet in the executive lounge, like she had for the past 4 years. Most employees didn't know her name. Some called her the cleaning girl. Others simply looked past her like she wasn't even there. But that morning, everything shifted. Nathaniel Blake, the towering CEO of Blake Tech, stopped in front of her. With a grin that didn't reach his eyes, he extended a formal invitation to the company's annual gala. "Wear something nice," he said, smirking. "You'll be our special guest this year." Everyone laughed. She didn't, because Isabel understood exactly what the invitation meant. It wasn't kindness. It was cruelty dressed in silk. What no one knew, not Nathaniel, not the 100 executives ready to watch her squirm, was that Isabel Carter had once belonged in rooms far grander than this. But back then, no one knew who she really was. The janitor's closet smelled like bleach and loneliness. Isabel Carter folded her grey uniform with practiced precision, placing it neatly on the shelf before clocking out. The day had been long. 14 hours of wiping glass walls, clearing abandoned lunch trays, and pretending she didn't hear the whispers. She was used to invisibility. She had perfected it. Most days, she moved through Blake Tech like a shadow. The younger employees ignored her, and the executives acted like speaking to her might lower their net worth. But she never complained. She came in early, stayed late, and kept her head down. For her daughter, Lena, and for her grandmother, Evelyn, whose medications were getting more expensive by the week. She thought the worst was behind her, until that morning. It was just after 9 a.m. when Nathaniel Blake stepped out of the elevator. Immaculate suit, jaw tight with ego. He was flanked by 2 interns when he spotted Isabel vacuuming the hallway. He stopped, looked at her like he'd just discovered a new form of entertainment. "You," he said, motioning toward her. "Isabel, right?" She nodded, cautiously. "I want you at the company gala tonight. Black tie, Ritz-Carlton ballroom." The interns snickered behind him. Isabel froze. "Excuse me? You're invited. You've earned it, haven't you?" he said with a theatrical smile. "Come as our guest. Let everyone see the real heart of Blake Tech." He turned and walked away before she could answer. The interns looked back at her, barely containing their laughter. In the break room later, she overheard 2 assistants talking. "He actually did it. He invited the cleaning lady. She's going to show up, right? Please tell me she's not that dense." Isabel sat alone in the corner, fingers clenched around her thermos. The words didn't surprise her. What surprised her was the tremor in her chest, a heat, not of shame, but of something buried deeper. She wasn't always the cleaning lady, and tonight they might just remember that. That night, Isabel stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her small apartment, staring at herself. Not the uniform, not the hairnet, not the gloves, just her. Isabel Carter, 32, tired eyes, calloused hands, and the weight of other people's assumptions pressing on her chest like a stone. The gala invitation was still on the table behind her, printed on thick cardstock, embossed with gold lettering like a joke told with expensive ink. It wasn't an invitation. It was a performance. She could still hear Nathaniel Blake's voice, sweet and sour all at once. "Let everyone see the real heart of Blake Tech." Translation: "Let's give the board something to laugh about." A cleaning woman in a ballroom full of billionaires. She should have torn the invitation in half. She should have laughed back in his face. Instead, she'd taken it home, and now she couldn't stop looking at it. Evelyn, her grandmother, entered the room quietly. Her hands shook from the arthritis, but her voice was always steady. "You're thinking about going," she said softly. Isabel didn't answer. Evelyn picked up the invitation and examined it. You know, your mama would have walked in that ballroom like she owned it. A bitter smile tugged at Isabel's lips. Mama didn't have a past like mine. Evelyn met her eyes in the mirror. Your mama was your past, and she gave you everything you need to stand tall, no matter where you are. Isabel's voice cracked. I'm just tired, Grandma. Tired of pretending I'm okay with being invisible. You were never meant to be invisible, Evelyn said, turning to leave. But just before she closed the door, she added, check the cedar box in the closet. There's something you might want to see. An hour later, after Lena had gone to bed, Isabel sat on the floor with the old cedar box open beside her. Inside were letters, photographs, and one envelope labeled in her mother's handwriting, for Belle, when she forgets who she is. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph, a younger version of herself, 17, confident, radiant, in a Parisian gallery, standing between two ambassadors. Her mother's hand rested gently on her shoulder, and on her own face there was no trace of hesitation, only belonging. Her eyes burned, her throat tightened. She had spent years burying that girl, but now, Isabel realized, that girl never stopped existing. She had just been waiting to be invited back into the light. The next morning was grey, not cloudy, just grey, the kind of light that makes the whole world feel undecided. Isabel didn't go to work. She told Evelyn she wasn't feeling well, which was half true. Her body was fine. It was her spirit that refused to move. She sat at the kitchen table in silence, while Lena colored at the counter. Her daughter was humming to herself, happy, unaware. Isabel watched her for a long time, wondering what kind of world she was growing up in, and whether it would ever see her for who she truly was. That thought broke something in her. She stood up quickly, walked into the hallway, and opened the hallway closet where she kept the box. She pulled out every photo, every letter, every clipping from old newspapers where her mother had been praised for her exhibitions, where Isabel's name was listed as the prodigy daughter, fluent in 3 languages and trained in classical piano. She stared at them, letting the pages scatter around her like fallen feathers. None of it mattered now. She worked nights scrubbing urinals. Her phone was prepaid. Her wardrobe came from thrift stores and sales racks. People flinched if she made eye contact in the executive lounge. Once at a corporate event, she had debated the ethics of modern art with a Nobel laureate. Now she barely spoke 10 full sentences a day. Somewhere along the way, she had folded herself smaller and smaller to fit into the silence, and in doing so, she had lost the sound of her own voice. Her fingers brushed across a photograph half buried beneath others. It was her father, tall, composed, and deeply serious, holding her as a child at a charity fundraiser. Behind them stood a woman in a deep emerald dress, smiling like the world couldn't touch her. Isabel touched the image with the back of her hand. Evelyn's voice came from the kitchen. "There's someone at the door." Isabel rose and opened it to find a woman she hadn't seen in over a decade. She was tall, elegant, wearing a trench coat and holding a portfolio. "Margot Davenport," the woman said. "I was a friend of your mother's, from the Musée d'Art Contemporain." Isabel blinked, stunned. "How did you—" "I saw a post online. An intern at Blake Tech posted a photo, said something cruel, but I recognized you." Margot stepped inside, eyes scanning the modest apartment. She took in the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the air of quiet resistance. "You disappeared," Margot said softly. "I had no choice. We thought you were dead." Isabel looked down. "Sometimes I wished I was." Margot's expression shifted. She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a garment bag. "I don't know what they're planning to do to you at that gala," she said, "but I know this. Your mother once told me that dignity is something you carry with your spine, not your wallet." She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress the color of midnight. Not flashy, elegant, timeless. "She designed it before she died," Margot said. "Said it was for a night her daughter would one day reclaim the room." Isabel stared at it like it might vanish. "She knew?" Isabel whispered. "She knew they'd try to silence you," Margot said. "And she wanted you to remember. You were never meant to be background." Isabel pressed the fabric to her chest. the weight of memory almost too much to bear. That night, after Lena went to sleep, Isabel stood in the bathroom again. This time, she didn't cry. She traced her jawline with her fingertips. She wrapped her hair into a soft bun. She opened her mother's old jewelry box and picked a single pearl earring. And then she stood there, still, tall, unshaken. And what about you? Have you ever felt like the world only saw a version of you that wasn't real, that left out everything you carried, everything you survived? If you've ever felt invisible, tell me your story in the comments. Someone out there might be waiting to hear it, just to know they're not alone. The morning of the gala, Isabel woke before the sun. She moved through the apartment like someone returning to her body after years of absence. Each motion quiet, deliberate. She brewed coffee, sliced apples for Lena's lunchbox, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook she hadn't touched in 5 years. On the cover, in faded gold letters, Strategies and Projections, 2014. She opened it. Inside were pages of notes she once made while shadowing her father at international summits. Thoughts about negotiation, cultural nuance, sustainable development, global equity. Half of the pages were in French. She read them slowly, letting her mind stretch into the space it used to occupy. Not as a janitor, not as a victim, but as a woman of intellect, insight, and substance. Evelyn passed by the kitchen, paused at the door and said, "You're different this morning." "I remembered something," Isabel replied. "What's that?" "That I don't need anyone's permission to walk into that room." She stood, closed the notebook, and pressed it to her chest. Later, while Lena braided her doll's hair on the couch, Isabel sat beside her and quietly said, "Sweetheart, tonight I'm going somewhere important, somewhere fancy." Lena looked up. "But they don't even like you there." Isabel paused. "I'm not going for them." "Then who for?" She smiled gently. "For the girl you're going to be one day. I want her to know she can stand anywhere, and she never has to shrink to make others comfortable." Lena nodded, serious beyond her years. "Can I wear your perfume?" Isabel laughed softly. "Just one drop." That night, she unzipped the garment bag with steady hands. She stepped into the dress like it was armor. She fastened the pearl earring, pressed her lips together in the mirror. And for the first time in years, she didn't see a woman who'd been beaten by life. She saw a woman who had survived. By 4 p.m., the small apartment had transformed into something between a war room and a dressing suite. Margot returned with a compact makeup kit, hairpins, and a confidence that filled every inch of the room. Isabel had asked her to stay, to help her prepare. "I don't want to just look the part," Isabel said. "I want to feel it, like I used to." "You don't need to feel it," Margot replied, brushing out her curls. "You just need to remember it's yours." They rehearsed posture, how to hold the wine glass, how to pause before speaking. They ran through names, ambassadors, donors, CEOs. Some Isabel remembered from events long ago, others she knew only from articles and whispers in the corridors of Blake Tech. When Lena peeked into the room and saw her mother standing in front of the mirror, she whispered, "You look like a movie star." Isabel smiled. "I look like me." The dress fit like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Midnight blue, clean lines, structured shoulders, no apology. The heels were borrowed, slightly worn but solid. And when she took her first steps across the room, she didn't wobble. She glided. Outside, a car pulled up to the curb. Isabel looked out the window, a sleek, black sedan. Not a limo, but more than enough to make the neighbors peek through the blinds. Margot handed her a small clutch. "Your ID, your invitation, and one lipstick, that's all you need." Evelyn kissed her on the forehead. "Show them, baby. Don't tell them. Show them." Isabel nodded, heart racing, but hands steady. As she stepped out the door, Lena called after her. "Mom?" She turned. "Don't forget to smile with your eyes. That's when you're the prettiest." Isabel blew her a kiss and disappeared into the night. The car ride was quiet. She could see the lights of the Ritz-Carlton before they turned the final corner. Through the tinted window, the event shimmered, a constellation of wealth, laughter, and power, and she began to sweat. What if no one remembered her? What if they did? and pretended they didn't? What if she walked into that room and became the punchline they all expected? Her breathing shortened. Her grip on the clutch tightened. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" She forced a nod. But inside, the shame clawed up again. The same shame she'd buried beneath years of quiet labor. The kind that whispers, "You don't belong here." A memory rose. Blurry, suffocating. The night her parents died. The cameras, the accusations, the betrayal from people she called friends. She had promised herself she'd never return to that world. And yet, here she was, driving straight into its jaws. "Turn around," something inside begged. But then, a stronger voice spoke up, not from memory, from within. "You're not here to ask for a seat," it said. "You're here to remind them who built the table." The car stopped. The door opened, and Isabel Carter stepped out, head held high. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers and polished egos. Laughter rose in waves, glasses clinked, and string instruments filled the air with elegant soundtracks to shallow conversations. The Blake Tech annual gala was known for excess, champagne fountains, influencers in borrowed couture, and Nathaniel Blake basking in his own spotlight. At exactly 8:03 p.m., the doorman cleared his throat. A woman stepped inside. The room didn't fall silent all at once. It started in ripples, a slow, stunned hush that spread like ink across fabric. She wore midnight blue. Her hair was swept up with a single pearl glinting at her ear. Her steps were slow, graceful, assured. Some guests blinked, unsure of who she was. A foreign dignitary? A princess? A socialite from some old money family? But others froze. A man near the bar dropped his drink. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Isabel." From across the room, Nathaniel Blake laughed, until he turned and saw her. The smirk vanished from his face, as if erased by force. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Isabel didn't flinch. She walked past rows of stunned executives and paused only when she reached the center of the ballroom. Her posture didn't waver. Her eyes scanned the crowd, acknowledging no one, until she heard a familiar voice. "Isabel Carter?" came the warm, accented tone of Ambassador Charles Whitmore. The British diplomat stepped forward, eyes wide. "My dear girl, it's been years." He took her hand, kissed it gently. "You were just a teenager the last time I saw you. I believe it was in Geneva. Your mother had just curated the UNICEF benefit." Nathaniel looked between them, confused. "Wait, what?" The ambassador turned to him. "You know Miss Carter, of course, daughter of Howard Carter, U.S. ambassador to France, and Elise Marchand, the artist, one of the most promising minds of her generation." A murmur swept through the crowd like electricity. Nathaniel's face drained of color. Isabel smiled, not arrogantly, not vindictively, just completely at peace. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Blake," she said calmly, her voice smooth as silk. "It was so generous of you to include me." He stammered. "I didn't know who you were." That much was clear. A nearby board member stepped forward. "Miss Carter, do you still do consulting? Because your insights on sustainable development in Africa were ahead of their time." Another chimed in. "Weren't you at Harvard? You lectured on global economics, didn't you?" "Yes," she said, turning to them with a graceful nod. "A long time ago. But some things never fade." Nathaniel stood frozen as guests drifted toward her, forming a circle of respect, curiosity, and admiration. His power, built on control, intimidation, and image, meant nothing in this moment. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't exposed him. She had simply walked in and reminded everyone what true presence looks like. 3 days later, Isabel sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, wrapped in a light cardigan, sipping tea as the sun dipped low over the skyline. She wasn't back in ballrooms. She wasn't chasing boardroom invitations. She was reviewing blueprints, not for fashion or fundraising, but for a women's mentorship center she had quietly dreamed about for years. A place where working mothers could learn financial literacy, public speaking, and job skills. Where girls like her daughter could grow up seeing power worn without apology. Her phone buzzed. An email from the Blake Tech board. Nathaniel Blake had resigned. The message ended with, "We would like to speak to you about a potential leadership role." She smiled. Not out of revenge, but because she now had options. She had her voice back. Evelyn stepped onto the rooftop with Lena, both carrying small cups of ice cream. "Mom," Lena said, "were they nice to you at the party?" Isabel thought for a long moment. "Some were," she said, "but it didn't matter. I didn't go to be liked. Then why?" She looked at her daughter. "To remind them who I am, and more importantly, to remind myself." She reached into her purse and pulled out the old photograph from Geneva, the 17-year-old Isabel smiling beside her mother, light in her eyes. She placed it next to a new photo, herself at the gala, standing tall, surrounded by a circle of people who finally saw her. The hair was different, the age showed, but the light was back. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up, fully, unapologetically, and without asking for permission. Maybe you've never walked into a ballroom full of strangers waiting to laugh at you, but maybe you've walked into a room and felt smaller than you are. Maybe you've been underestimated, overlooked, or made to believe you didn't belong, just because of your job, your background, your silence. If this story spoke to something inside you, tell me. Share your experience in the comments. Your story might be the very thing someone else needs to hear today, to remember who they are. And if you believe that showing up as yourself, fully and without apology, is a kind of revolution, leave a like and consider subscribing. Because here we tell stories that remind us you don't need permission to be powerful, and the ones who rise from silence often have the loudest legacy.